There's been a growing number of sexual abuse cases against pastors in South Africa. The most recent, a 52-year-old Katlehong pastor accused of sexually grooming minors and assaulting men. And we can't forget Timothy Omatosho, who's facing multiple rape charges as well. Questions are now being asked about churches being regulated. Let's expand on this and more with Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. Thanks so much for your time, Bishop. Appreciate it. Now, I know you're not the umbrella watchdog body over churches, but I'm hoping you can answer these questions, right? We've seen some research by the Vatican and the US regarding sexual abuse in the church. But do we know just how widespread it is here in South Africa?
No, definitely not. I think let's put it differently. Sexual abuse is widespread in society generally. And it's not only about the institutions of church, whether it's schools or anywhere, it's everywhere. And my attitude to it is to say we should treat criminality as criminality wherever it occurs. And it's totally reprehensible, to use Desmond Tutu's language, without remainder. But once you make it a matter of church, where people have got an attitude about church that sort of sacralizes the space, because it is a sacred space church supposed to be, then you are giving space for an aura, a sacral aura, to the behavior, reprehensible behavior of someone who's called a pastor. I think that a criminal is a criminal, whatever their title. Treat them as such. And it is about crime, not about the institution.
But given that church is such a sacred place and people follow pastors and bishops, etc., to whatever they say and to the T in some instances, that's where the problem lies, right? Because we have this place that people trust and will basically, young boys in this instance, believe that it's the gospel if they hear it from a pastor. That's the difference here. And that's why, we have so many researches being done in terms of sexual abuse in churches abroad. But in South Africa, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I totally get you. It is crime. A criminal's a criminal regardless of where the person is working. But the sanctity of a church and the trust that people have in pastors is where a line comes in and where we need to look at it differently, don't you think?
I would agree with your view that because it is a sacred space, so to say, it has got that order. But you can't regulate. You can't regulate a personal misbehavior, criminal behavior. It does not matter what laws you have in place outside of criminal laws. That's really what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And that in fact, the normal traditional way in which churches manage behavior and conduct within their churches is through synodal churches that have got structures where the leader of the church doesn't own the church, but that you are there as you're taken through a program. You are serving there under the supervision of a structure of church and a collegiality that will dispense of you even as they treat you as a criminal. But if you are a pastor that is owning, you started your own church, you own the church, it's a little more difficult because people go there following this charismatic person who then becomes, God forbid, a criminal. Whether it is grooming children or whatever the case may be, there aren't checks and balances. So I think that part of the problem can be that. But this is not only in such churches. I mean, you talk about the Catholic Church in Europe, where there have been cases, and this is a very synodal church which has got checks and balances, but it still happens. And so it's about how you manage the environment and keep it safe from crime.
Well, how do you manage the environment? Because do we have any spaces in church for people to actually raise these issues inside the church, given that they're so afraid to actually go to police and report these cases?
The first call I would make is exactly do that. Go to the police and call these cases. One of the things that we've looked at the South African Council of Churches, just for interest's sake, is we have a WhatsApp platform, for example, that we created for COVID, information, and we're turning this a platform for other purposes as well. We've now developed it as a whistleblowing facility against corruption, and we're also looking at developing it as a whistleblowing or a reporting facility for gender and sexual abuses, and link it to the existing social development platform, because they've got a beautiful one there that can actually locate where you are.
Yeah.
But sometimes you may not be able to make that phone call. That's why you need a WhatsApp. And so there must be ways in which you can use this, but these are simply ways of saying, help, because my mother will not allow me, my father will not allow me to report this priest. Therefore, I must be able to reach out, and that's what we're doing the WhatsApp platform for.
Okay, last question in terms of the regulation of churches, right? I know it's obviously, many would argue against the constitutional right to freedom of religion, but you also mentioned that it's easy to start a church in South Africa. Why is that the case? We've seen people being fed snakes, grass, doom sprayed on them. You know, the most ridiculous things in the name of Christianity is what we've seen in this country. And then the question about regulating the sector comes into play here. So is it not time, or is it not time to actually try to look at it in a different way? So we say, you can't just go to any town and set up a church. What gives you the right to become a pastor?
Well, that matter has been teased quite a bit in South Africa, particularly by religious community together with the CRL Rights Commission. Most churches have been against it for a number of reasons. But I would then go back and say, hardly anything is regulated in South Africa. I mean, I can start a shop, a spaza shop, and nobody's going to say, I can't do that here. Nobody's going to say, what quality am I selling? So what is needed in South Africa is, you're right, at least if I'm going to start a church, I must apply somewhere, especially if I'm going to open in a space that is a public space. You must have some kind of system. I would agree it's a municipal facility to say, how do you manage the opening? Some of these churches run as businesses. Some of them operate as such as you say, whatever the leader of the church thinks is right, it's called gospel. Now, surely we do have a problem with some of these because they put the faith into disrepute. But we don't have a system of managing that, and this matter has been canvassed and canvassed and canvassed over and over again. But if there are systems about at least opening your church or opening your shop, that you cannot open it without certain provisions being in place, maybe that would make a difference.
All right, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Have a good night, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches.